Chapter 8. We sat and I unleashed the flashing icons in my field of view. Beautiful words filled my interface as an undulating pulse of victory soared through me. You have reached level 17. +1 Constitution, +1 Dexterity. You have 3 attribute points to spend. Your companion Priya has reached level 14. Priya has 4 attribute points to spend. Since Priya's disposition toward you is beloved, you may spend 4 attribute points. Your companion Priya has reached level 15. Priya has 4 attribute points to spend. Since Priya's disposition to you is beloved, you may spend 8 attribute points. Sharing the quest to save Roshan with Priya had been a smart move. All the work to get Roshan back had been worth it. I felt the same calming power of her presence like I had before I lost her. But 2 levels made for a thick pile of icing on what was quite the tasty cake. With the extra attribute point I received each level, the icing turned German chocolate. Priya still only received 4 points per level. I flipped open the player's manual in my HUD and searched with a simple thought. Bound NPC attributes. Unlike players, who receive an additional elective attribute point per level beginning at level 15, all soulbound NPC companions receive 4 points per level until they reach level 20. Good to know. I assigned our attribute points following my standard method, where I received Dexterity and Constitution, and Priya received Intellect and Wisdom. I might have given her a little more Constitution, but she was a ranged caster, and we now had a healer to bail her out if she got cocky. I was still pissed about what she'd done, but I needed to grow up. Once I'd ticked off the attributes and given a cursory scan to the results in our mana and HP pools, we sat for an hour as Giles laid out some lore. For once, we had time to spare. The races of Enora had attributed the ways of their world entirely to their goddess, Solara, and her evil opposite, Hokram. All things were as deemed by Solara, and generations of mythology explained things they couldn't otherwise understand. This sounded vaguely familiar. Solara created wards that kept the evil presences of the instanced dungeons inside. Demons served the bosses who ruled over these instances. The more Giles explained, the more questions I had. I tried to remember we were there to kick some butt, and asked only the ones that distracted me most. Maybe you can explain why Solara doesn't just destroy these places. If she's all-powerful. If? Roshan blurted. Gemini Fowler. Sorry, fine, since she's all-powerful. I awaited an expression of acceptance before carrying on. Since she's all-powerful, why doesn't she just wipe them out? All of them. An admittedly grand question, Gemini, worthy of an answer. The recurring theme of my studies of Enoran history is balance. In nature there is balance. In magic there is balance. For prosperity there is poverty. For BS there is religion. Most of all, in the struggle between good and evil, there is balance. Where there is Solara, there is Hokram. Speak not the name of he who you would not invite to your hearth, Roshan barked. She made some symbol with her hands that involved tapping her forehead, then her stomach, and pulling an earlobe. It was such a blur I couldn't have repeated it. Roshan, Clan Fortuan. He softened his tone and leaned toward her. My people have a saying. To deny evil is to give it quarter. Your sentiments prove futile when we sit in the belly of the very thing you fear. I fear nothing. Roshan raised her chin. I am guided by the light. You bleed it. I beg your pardon, priestess. I seek only to ensure a special group of adventurers is armed in the best way possible for a treacherous journey ahead. We have to focus on the threats before us at every turn, and you need not worry about conjuring evil with your words when you are promised its physical presence ahead. He paused to give her an opportunity to respond. She parted her lips briefly, pushed them back together, then nodded. Today you write a history I think will be adopted in the annals of many races. It is imperative you maintain mental soundness and are physically prepared, for there are grander battles to fight then against sentiment, and your destiny is tied to 2 great creatures in the child of the guardian of the tree of Solara. He pointed at Priya. And the Shenwa reborn. He thrust a thumb at me. Shenwa? Rashan threw her hands up to her cheeks and slid off the edge of the fountain. Shh, shh. She couldn't seem to repeat the word. Oh yeah, she missed all that. Pregnancy, Jara being Priya's mother. Oh, and I'm a mystic creature, the second coming of the almighty and powerful beta testers of yore. Damn, I should have covered it last night. What else did we need to disclose? It seemed her continent had beta testers as well, and the lore surrounding them had been much the same. It made sense, really. I had to fan her for 5 minutes before the wide-eyed expression painted across her face dissipated. As I held her head in my lap and waved one of my gloves, I peered at Giles. You were saying something about balance and how it kept Solara from destroying the instances? Yes. Cultural beliefs vary, but mine favors the idea that, if Solara were to destroy this place in which we sit, and the beings we seek were removed from the dark pools of life, it would free dark energy for Hokum to create new, more dangerous creatures. Such evils might be set loose on the world instead of being confined to these instances. Long has he labored in ways we can't comprehend to get a foothold and spread his influence across Enora. A timeless battle between Hokum and Solara has raged for the prize that is this world, and should Solara allow his minions to take domain above ground, well, we've seen the results in the east and the rotten landscape above us. The plague barrens resulted from one of Hokrum's own creations, the Groot slang. So powerful in magic are these vile beings, they broke the wards Solara put in place to harness the spread of the demon influence after the spread of the blight. To free up the dark pools of energy for more evil souls to enter the world would be to unleash a shadow on the people of light like the world has never seen. This is why we believe Solara built her tree in the dark wood, to ensure the light's energy flourishes on high, so darkness may only flourish below. Wow, this dude has words. When I met Rashan, we entered an underground place through a tree in the dark wood, which is an ironic name now that I think about it. A minion of an underlord called Kame held her captive as he commanded minions to burrow into the ground, building tunnels. That place wasn't instanced. So, what keeps those minions underground? Giles' laughter was devoid of humor. A patient demon underlord. Kame seeks to gather more power unto himself. As he sits imprisoned by the wards, his demonic abilities must allow him to communicate with those on the outside. I would dare say this minion was once an adventurer who failed in his quest to overthrow Kame. He likely groveled for his life and pledged fealty to his new dark lord in exchange for his survival. I doubt it. I shook my head. Kroll was low level. Which might have been Hokrum's own doing, but I've no answers for that. However, that you say they burrowed deep in the ground makes sense. Powerful artifacts lie deep in the soils of Enora. Fed by the magical essences of the world above, they come in many forms. Indeed, if Kame could locate and excavate such an item that has flourished over the ages, feeding from the energy of the Tree of Solara, that would draw much power to him. Man, this world is deep. As soon as the words left my lips, I worried they violated the rules for communicating with non-players. But then Giles nodded. Deep and dangerous. I peered down to find Rashan's focus affixed to me. Forgive me, Lord. I smiled at her and rubbed a thumb across her full cheek. There's nothing to forgive. Just a little fainting spell is all. Rashan struggled for a moment, then finally sat up and turned. She kneeled, bending low and setting her arms on the stone floor beneath, touching her forehead to the ground. She muttered something indecipherable. I tilted my head to one side as a glow surrounded her. Babe? Giles gripped my arm hard and shook his head. Silence. I quieted. Her mutterings formed no coherent words, despite the fact I should understand any neutral or lawful languages. A wave of light extended from her fingers, splayed on the floor, and golden tendrils escaped their tips to wrap around my ankles and up my legs. The light surrounded me. My temples thumped, and the sound of my blood running through my veins was static in my ears. At long last, Rashan raised her head. She reached out with a thumb and touched it to the center of my forehead. Long have my people awaited your return. I bless you, Shenwa, in the name of our great goddess and giver of life, Solara, that you may be guided by the light she gives. I shall henceforth call you master, and serve your every need by your command. My reward is to serve as I bathe in Solara's light in my lowly human form. Blessed be thee, my beloved." Then she lowered her head again and muttered some more. "You have received a blessing. The blessing of the Shenwa. Blessed art thou. It is proven. You are the mystical traveler, the rebirth of a race of magical beings who graced the world of Enora 2 millennia ago. You will prepare the way for the second coming of the Shenwa. Though your trials will not be easy, you will forever be known as the one who led the way to receive millions of players to the new world of Enora online. Congratulations, Gemini Fowler. Your destiny has been revealed. +5 permanent boosts to strength and intelligence. +3 permanent boost to wisdom. New title available. Prophet." "What the hell?" I yelled. But no one cared. I threw a glance at Destiny as she sat on the edge of the fountain, staring down at the priestess with a wide-eyed gaze. Giles sat silently next to me, his head bowed in reverence. A chill erupted in my bones despite the warmth cast by Rashawn's blessing. The contradiction of physical sensations confused me, and for whatever reason, my mind shot to Priya. My heart dropped when I saw the empty space where she'd been sitting, and I jumped off the fountain as cold crept through my spine. My half-elf huddled in the corner of the room farthest from the fountain, her arms embracing herself as she shivered violently. A furious scowl wrinkled her features, her white teeth grinding so the lumps of her jowls worked. My initial thought that she'd been hiding resurrection sickness vanished when her eyelids fluttered open, revealing black balls of obsidian glass beneath. I was punched by the awareness that the outer edge of Rashawn's glow ended near the tips of Priya's boots. She struggled to fold herself into the corner and pull her feet clear of the halo. "Rashawn, stop." Seeing as she'd already buffed me with her blessing, I didn't think interrupting would be so horrible, and Priya's unbridled fear tore at me so hard, my knees quivered, although a part of me expected Giles to chastise me a second time for interrupting. He surprised me with his harsh response. "Rashawn!" he barked from his perch on the fountain. The priestess stopped muttering and glanced up at the angry elf. "Cease your incantations and rise at once." Rashawn jumped to her feet as all eyes turned to the corner where our companion huddled in a dark shadow of suffering. I stepped closer, but Giles grasped my sleeve and pulled. Destiny launched from the fountain, but Giles' boot shot out and tripped her, sending the Michonne sprawling. "No!" Giles cried. "No one approaches without my leave." Silence filled the room like a thick scent. Destiny clutched my hand, and it wasn't long before Rashawn grasped the other. Where I might otherwise have taken comfort from their physical gestures, the mix of fear, sadness, and utter hatred mixing in a concoction of emotional soup crossed the airwaves and commanded my focus. What seemed a lifetime later, Priya's blue irises reappeared. With a final shudder, the shivering ceased. She glared at each of us. My heart's rhythm pounded at my Adam's apple, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Babe?"
"How did I?"
Fear rattled her words before they could escape her throat, so she sounded like she smoked a pack a day.
"I don't know what happened. One moment Rashawn was praying."
Her lips pouted.
"Must you all stare at me so? Must you be so far away?"
I stepped past Giles, scurried over to Priya, then knelt next to her. The elf stood aside as Destiny and I dropped to our knees.
"I don't know what happened,"
Priya said. Destiny slid in front of me and embraced her. I took a step back. "It's her shadow affinity," Giles said. We all turned to find him sitting on the edge of the fountain again, one foot on the floor, the other crossed over his knee. It struck me as out of character. "The blessing Rashawn cast upon the traveler was, well, beyond her level. The light surged through me in a way I haven't experienced, except when viewing Priya's ward." A hand squeezed my shoulder, and I glanced back to find Rashawn standing behind me, frowning in thought. I shared her disposition. We were the anchor and the leader, and we were both helpless.
"Am I dangerous?"
Priya asked. Giles nodded. "Wonderfully so. As you gain experience, you will become a force against those who stand in your way."
"And to my allies?"
"No, Priya. They are your bound companions. While your magic might conflict with Rashawn's, it is no direct danger to her any more than hers is to you. Your reaction was instinctual, but... He peered at Roshan. I would recommend you give such blessings at a distance, just to be safe.
I will,
Roshan said.
I am sorry, Priya. I didn't know. I know you didn't.
I saw it as a testament to Roshan's grit that she stepped forward and embraced her friend. If it was, as you say, above her level, I said. The question is how Roshan blessed me that way. I'm baffled as well, Giles said. I cannot even see the name of the blessing in my interface. Are your stats boosted? I nodded. Permanently. 13 total points. 13? Giles stared at Roshan, his mouth gaping. 13? Do you think you could share these blessings? He burst into laughter and paced back and forth, reminding me of how he had in the back alley in Broomhill when he discovered I was a mythic, straight from his people's lore. Roshan shook her head as she leaned against the wall next to Priya. No, Her eyes flared for an instant. Destiny clicked one of her claws between her teeth. I dismissed it as a nervous habit, then turned my attention back to Roshan. What?
Jara, near her tree, when you and Priya, at the cave, she laid hands on me. She had me channel the light without the aids of weapons or the statistical boosts granted by my robe. I glowed blue, and she offered me a gift. When I asked what gift, she said it would avail itself. Now I understand.
Giles clapped his hands one loud time, causing us all to jump. It is amazing. You people. If only I'd received such boons so early in my adventures. Well, that makes sense. Jara channeled the spell through you. You say you were standing by the tree of Solara when she gave you this lesson? Roshan nodded. Right. To bank such a blessing in a low level would be a difficult endeavor, with your limited mana pool. Such concentrated energy could only come from a source of great power, like the roots of Solara's tree. You have channeled a spell through ley lines deep in the ground. Amazing. Giles shook his head. That you contained the blessing while you were captive only to channel it now is a tribute to your devotion to the goddess. Your teacher must have been a great man. Roshan gripped my shoulder again.
He was what you say.
Destiny grasped Priya's hands and pulled her to her feet. Everyone feel better? Giles asked. We have a long day ahead.
We're still going in?
Priya asked.
Really?
Destiny asked. Roshan floated across the room to the fountain, picked up her staff and raised it high.
Revel in the power of the light, my friends. The work of the pious is never done, and there is evil to conquer.
She paced toward the gleaming surface of light that separated the preparation room from the dungeon proper. Roshan was kick-ass. Someone's ready, I said. Roshan, Giles beckoned. We should prepare before we break the plane and enter the dungeon. Roshan turned, lowered her staff, and blushed. She met our curious glances. She was single-minded when it came to this stuff. Come, friends, gather around, Giles said. First, eat your best stat-boosting foods. While we nourish ourselves, we'll talk tactics. Thump. The floor shook. Vibrations tingled in my feet. Giles' head whipped around toward the dungeon entrance. Thump. We all followed his gaze as my heart mimicked the bass-rich sound out there in my ears. Thump. 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 A shadow fell across the floor outside the transparent magical barrier. The lower half of what my mind equated to a lizard appeared in the doorway and turned in our direction. A massive head craned from the top of the doorway, and the thumping in my ears grew louder, though no longer caused by heavy footfalls. It's about to get very real. I ground my teeth, but not out of fear nor foreboding, while the others probably saw the wide gaping mouth of innumerable sharp teeth that could easily snap me in half as they eyed 2 thick tusks that could impale the breadth of me 4 times over. I saw something else. My first victim in an instance in Enora. Then the beast bellowed, inviting our challenge. Chapter 9. The massive tail swept around, then slammed into Destini's plate armor. She careened backward and slammed into the stony wall. Frozen pellets fell from the sky, coloring the beast's scaly hide in blue glimmers of frost as Priya's hands glowed icy blue. The illuminated yellow arrow released from my bow zoomed across the ivy-covered hallway, impaling the side of the beast's jaw just as Giles rematerialized behind the monster and jammed both his daggers into its hulking tail.
Your bow skill has reached rank 80. You have learned a new skill, Exploding Arrow. Infused by the power of mana, a missile of flame explodes upon impact, inflicting 36 to 45 fire damage. Minimum level, 15. Cost, 25 mana. Cooldown, 10 seconds. Additional effect, burn. +2 fire damage every 5 seconds. Requires no ammunition. Bleed effects are negated when using this skill.
Giles ripped 2 long tears into the beast's flesh as I knocked another arrow. Blood spurted streaks across the elf's face as the ice storm spell dissipated. The beast's tail swung and slammed into the elf, but after a 10-foot slide, he threw his arms out and gained his balance. The creature gave an ear-shattering roar. Giles charged forward in a blur, then plunged a dagger into the monster's hide. With the blood painting his face and the crazy smile painted across his mouth, the elf reminded me of some crazy Highlander at war.
Critical hit.
Priya's hands swirled around each other with the smooth grace forming an orange tracer. Then a flash of fire exploded between the creature's tusks. The blast reflected in the monster's irises, but its rapt attention remained on Destiny, who cursed the beast in her unique vernacular.
Overgrown lizard-like scum, we shall smite thine smelliness to the burning underworld.
Rashan raised her free hand, then cast a flash heal on Destiny. The priestess's face was the calmest of all, her focus intent, and drive unhindered as she timed her casts. As the green numbers floated above Destiny's head, I focused on her health bar. Rashan's low level meant weaker heals. No matter how much damage she mended, Destiny netted a loss with each incoming strike. I stepped toward Rashan as I loosed an uncharged arrow. Take a second off your count between heals. It doesn't look like you'll grab aggro, and we don't know what abilities this monster might pull out. He could blow away a significant chunk of Destiny's health all at once.
Understood. I will keep her topped off.
Her health wavering around at 50%, my feline-like tank rose, then charged across the space, slamming her shoulder into the leg of the beast. Despite its mass, the mob stumbled backward. Giles dodged to avoid the retreating hind claw it planted to regain its balance. I released another arrow in a blur that lodged into the beast's neck.
Critical hit. Tusked Demon Gia, -78 HP. Bleed effect. Bonus effect. Arrow replenished. Your bow's skill has reached 81. Your ranged attack skill has reached 38.
Nice. The ability replenishing 20% of my arrows had executed, or procced, as gamer nerds liked to say, and the critical damage meant my penetrating arrow ability had gained power with the extra points in dexterity and weapon skill ups, which were happening about every 4th arrow fired. Priya flashed a wall of fire in the Gia's face and it turned. I feared it would stomp after her, but it parted its lips and bellowed instead, another ear-shattering sound that filled the hallways and left me disoriented. The half-elf's golden curls blew backward in a high wind, then settled. Above her head, yellow text floated and jiggled.
Silenced.
Well, that kind of sucked, but it just meant I would have to hit harder. I grinned like I'd just unwrapped a new bicycle at my birthday party as I withdrew another arrow. The wrinkles on Priya's forehead deepened with confusion at my expression. She threw her hands out.
Why are you smiling, dude? I can't cast.
Giles, I barked. Priya is silenced. Understood, the elf yelled as he thrust his blades into the demon Gia's leg, gripped it with both hands, and let his weight drag him down to the floor as the long dagger ripped a ferocious gash. I wondered if there was a leather worker in Enora who could make him a bad motherfucker wallet. No sooner had I chuckled that the Gia whipped around, its bloody tail toppling the elf to the floor. It spun in a full circle, swiping Giles toward me as if sweeping up a mess on its backswing. I jumped over him as he slid under. With a quick glance over my shoulder, I grinned. What, you can't handle a level 19 elite anymore? Giles shoved his hands over his shoulders, rolled into a ball and shoved himself up and onto his feet with deft agility. He reversed his grip on the daggers. I'm not used to being level 20 anymore, Silver Lips. He activated stealth. How about this? Whoever gets the killing blow receives the first ale courtesy of the loser who doesn't. You're on, I yelled and knocked an arrow. It's a wager. Get your coins ready, Shenwa. I drew back on my bowstring, then released it, but the arrow flew wide of my target. Then Priya charged. I ran a quick inspection.
Priya is silenced.
Ah! Priya screamed as she wielded her staff high overhead. Dirty droppings of worm filth! Destiny yelled as she swung her sword in a wide arc. Motherless son of a demon whore! She twisted and sliced up the Gia's belly, opening a gash. Green liquid splashed her, but she spat as if it meant nothing, then bent her back at an impossible angle to dodge the incoming claws of the beast's response swing. Stinking pile of reptilian scales! Priya slipped in the green fluid, then fell hard on her butt. I laughed so hard, my next shot missed by a mile. Priya slid in the gross body fluid, struggling until she reached her feet. After throwing me a quick scowl, she turned and swung the staff at the beast's knee, about 2 feet higher than her head.
Priya hits Tusked Demon Gia, if you want to call that a hit. Tusked Demon Gia, -1 HP.
1 health?
Priya yelled as she swung again. She eyed her staff too casually for someone who stood at the foot of a giant Gia.
I thought this thing did 10 to 15 damage.
Priya nicks the Tusked Demon Gia. Giant Gia, -1 HP.
Blood streaming from a gash in her forehead, Destini's health had dropped to about 35%. Roshan's mana pool was getting a tad low, but it was the former's pain tolerance that impressed me most. If the realism of Enora extended to non-players, getting slammed around and sliced open sucked donkey balls for her as much as it did me.
Priya taps the Tusked Demon Gia. Critical hit. Tusked Demon Gia, -3 HP.
Priya's mana looked good. Her wisdom score for her level sped her replenishment, even in combat mode, but it was even faster when she wasn't able to cast. Unfortunately, her melee could use some work, and if I didn't control my laughing, I'd never hit the beast with my bow. Damage is relevant to who or what you're fighting and their level, I barked. She continued to bat away with her staff. God, she could be hard-headed. Priya, I yelled, meaning to warn her away. Giles threw me a warning glance, and I stopped. He grinned, and his meaning came to me. He wanted me to let her learn the hard way while things were under control. I returned the smile and turned my attention to the rest of my party. Roshan, Destiny, potions, now! They each raised their hands and winked their eyes. Potions appeared in their grasps, then they drank. Destini's health jumped about 20%. Giles' potions didn't screw around, and my tank was buffed. Roshan's mana jumped to half full. Priya's hands glowed again as she tested her spells at close range. Just as she halted her cast and turned to return to her original position near me, the Gia swung its tail in another full rotation. This time, it got beneath her, and whereas Giles slid across the floor, Priya flew. Watching her sail through the air, I cringed. Then she hit the ground, thumping hard and rolling until she came to a halt on her back. Giles ripped his dagger from the beast's tail and yelled without turning his head. Casters stand in the rear, especially when silenced. When Priya got her wind back, she pushed to her feet then sneered at the beast. Tendrils of lightning radiated between her fingertips as her blue casting bar filled. A thick bolt of lightning shot from her palms then impacted the creature's head, causing it to slam against the wall.
Priya casts Lightning Pulse on Tusked Demon Gia. Critical hit. Tusked Demon Gia, -72 HP.
The Gia's HP dropped below 10%. It shimmied off the wall, righted itself, then tried its silencing bellow again. But this time, the text above Priya's head was green.
Tusked Demon Gia uses Stifling Roar. Resisted.
Nice try, you fucker of mothers,
Priya screamed. Close enough. I released a drilling arrow and pegged the Gia right in the eye. Its health dropped below 5%. It reared up, wound back one of its short, burly, scaly arms, then punched Destiny hard in the chest, sending her flying backward into the corner of the wall. Text above her head reported, Stunned. I stared at her open-mouthed. Spinning stars over her head? Really, Enora? That's just precious. You're a cheeseball. Gods, I needed to find her a shield, but the damned cost was beyond prohibitive, more than anything else I sought in Tralsby. I guess there wasn't a high demand. It wasn't like the hills were teeming with adventurers. Yet. With my tank temporarily incapacitated, the beast turned its one good eye on me. Although Priya had slammed the Gia into the wall with her lightning spell, it chose me to focus on, probably because of my arrow lodged in its ruined eye, streaming white fluid dripping from the wound. My glutes clenched as a low growl rumbled in its chest. "Rut-row, Raggy." An infuriating roar filled the room, then the Gia stomped in my direction. Destiny shook her head to clear the cobwebs as she stumbled to her feet. "Incoming!" I knocked another arrow as the massive beast bore down on me. Giles flashed into view. He stood high on the demon lizard's back, the elongated blades of his curved dagger raised high. When he slammed them into the demon's neck, the bastard elf grinned at me. I eyed the monster's health and saw why. He'd been waiting for just the right moment, and then he'd activated Spine Snap to finish it. Cheating mother. I dove to one side as the demon gave its final cry and slammed into the floor where I'd stood.
You have vanquished Tusked Demon Gia, Level 19 Demon Reptile, Elite, 1750 XP.
Giles leapt from the beast's back, then rolled across the floor. He sprung up next to me and sheathed his daggers with a flourish. Dude was a freaking superhero. We gazed upon the bloody result of our first battle together. Green and red splatters I likened to a Pollock replica painted by a teen on LSD covered the walls. Was it morose that I found myself missing the camera on my cell phone? I'd have loved to send Meyer and Caitlin from my old guild that shot with a caption of "Killing Room Floor." Without bothering to look at Giles, I chuckled. "You waited until we got him low enough for your spine snap to finish him, then you sprang it." The elf turned and patted my back a few times. "Try not to take it too hard. You're not the first fool to wager against an elf hundreds of years his senior with 100 times your combat experience." He paced towards Destiny and muttered, "Imbecile." "Hey, screw you too, buddy," I laughed. "Well gratified by your offer. You're too scrawny for my taste." Not only was Giles a man of his words, he was a man of last words. When he offered a hand to help Destiny from the floor, I performed a cursory check of my combat logs, focusing on my tank. My suspicions were confirmed. She was a natural. Although Priya would sometimes overcast and draw her enemy's ire, Destiny was like a bird of prey, perched and waiting for her target to make the wrong move. Roshan was a lower level, and accommodating her shortcoming required more frequent spell casting and cost us a health potion. So there were two sides to that little handicap. One, she had to overheal to keep up with Destiny's loss of HP, and two, she drew less aggro because the heals replenished less damage. In turn, Priya and Giles drew some aggro. A glance at Roshan's XP bar revealed she'd jumped over a third of a level in the single encounter. If this first fight was any indicator, she would gain ground on the rest of us. Giles made me sick. The man's every strike was measured. His level had dropped the second we stepped through the magic barrier and into the dungeon, and even though he complained abilities he learned after level 20 were unavailable to him, he outdamaged all of us more than a simple level advantage should have. And then some. Priya approached. Her eyes glimmered with excitement.
I never imagined I would be in such a precarious situation as this, yet I surge with excitement.
She clasped my hand and rose on her toes to kiss my cheek. I turned my head and bent, giving her quarter. She held her lips close to my ear and whispered,
I defied you, Gemini. I allowed my emotions to get the better of me. I will endeavor to do better. I've dishonored you with my rogue actions and set a poor example.
I gave her a few short nods and kept my tone low as I carefully voiced my reply. We're a team. I watched you bleed out in Broomhill because of that man. Sparing him took all the restraint I could muster, and that was just so he could deliver a message. You chose to send a different one, but as I've said to all of you from the beginning, you act of your own free will. I won't judge you for doing it just because it contradicted my plans. Whether it's my life or not, it's still a game. I pulled her close to embrace her sideways. In a sense, you were right. If we go through life letting people walk on us, we'll just be covered in footprints. But I'm not angry because of what you did. The way you went about it was a shifty violation of our trust. My disappointment stems from how you lured us into complacency only to take advantage of us. The deceit. Priya peered up at me for a few long breaths. Then she nodded. Though I was still acclimating to her emotions, the one I sensed seemed to linger somewhere in the area of guilt.
I'm sorry. I will do better.
You're used to doing things your way, Priya. I understand that. Life in the woods, primarily on your own, would make anyone independent. But you're part of a family now, and we all love you. I beckoned with my fingers to draw Destiny and Rashan over. I propose that from now on, we discuss major decisions and act with the majority. I'm willing to accept when you all vote against me, but trust is everything. Rashan rubbed a circle on my back.
Then my first vote is against this proposal.
What? My eyebrows shot up. Do you see the contradiction there?
Solara has blessed you, Gemini. You know our strengths and weaknesses as if they're second nature to you. Even when you've, screwed up, you have shown the humility of a leader.
She turned her gaze on Priya.
Gemini seeks to let you off easy for your betrayal, but it is no small thing, this action you took, and though I forgive you as Solara would require, you must earn the trust of your family again.
Priya chewed her lip. After an uncomfortable silence, she nodded.
I pledge to earn back your trust.
She leaned forward and kissed Rashan's cheek. I still think we should vote on our situations, I said. I respect your ideas. Destiny gave a curt nod.
I vote that Gemini leads us.
You're missing the point. Rashan mimicked the Michonne's nod.
Seconded.
No, you... Priya smiled, albeit sideways and lacking teeth.
I vote yes.
Rashan clapped her hands as if slapping dust away.
It is settled.
They used the democratic system I'd postulated to overrule me and leave me solely in command. Before I could argue against it, Guile summoned us. Party, to me! He stood at the opposite end of the hallway near the dungeon entrance, and gestured before stepping inside. After we crossed through the magic barrier, he pointed at the fountain. Since we have it, set your hands in its waters, replenish your energy, and then we'll proceed to the real fighting.
You didn't consider that real fighting?
Priya asked. What, battling an elite mob's knee with your crooked little staff? She faked a scowl. Giles chuckled. It was real enough, my elven sister, but experience tells me it was but a prelude to what's coming. We might spend days in this Solara-forsaken place. He turned his gaze on Destiny. And I have little doubt when we come out the other side, your party will be changed forever. But we should get on with it. I stepped to the fountain and dipped my hands in its cool waters. A chilly sensation spread up my arms and throughout my body. My head cleared, and the soreness in my bow fingers washed away. When Destiny reached into the pool, the green goo and blood vanished from her face and gear. Call me crazy, but you're prettier without all that muck.
Silence, master.
Her cheek twitched like she'd smile, but she beat it. Giles' crimson war paint also vanished. I eyed the water to see if it absorbed the filth, but it remained transparent and blue. Another little detail to remind me I was in a game world. The elf sat on the edge of the fountain, running the tips of his fingers across the crystal tubes. It's been years since I've seen one of these. So much time has passed since Brugh and I adventured, I'd forgotten the serenity these things give off. Depending on the size of this place, we could find one or two others. I'd forgotten about Brugh. The giant warrior with the massive jewel-encrusted greatsword had acted as Giles' firewall back in Broomhill when we sought out our elven trainer. Felt like ages ago. Where is Brugh, anyway? I asked. Around. Brugh wanders. Restless type. I see. Tell me something, Giles. If you hadn't seen the mage outside, how long would you have followed us without our knowing? And why go to the trouble? Giles raised one shoulder and dropped it. You left Broomhill with low skills, low levels, and a quest to retrieve an entropy crystal. Our mutual shopkeeping friends, Breeder and Lyra, preferred a little insurance. My interference would have incurred penalties to your advancement. But even mystical beings require help from time to time. Wouldn't you agree? An image of two men lying in the road between Broomhill and Warrington with their throats slit from ear to ear, as Destiny and Priya slept inside the cart was evidence enough of that. I wholeheartedly concede the point. But don't you have anything better to do? Giles chuckled. Funny. Brugh had the same query. The expedient answer is no. I have nothing better to do. Truth be told, I don't get summoned for much weapons training in Broomhill. I always want the truth to be told. Good. From me you'll have it, no matter how hard it might be to hear. He slapped his hands on his legs. Then why don't we start with why you were in a hole like Broomhill? Do we have to do this now? You don't trust me?
It's not a question of trust,
Priya interjected.
You've saved us twice. I think Gemini has reservations about my mother and thinks she might be tangled up with her somehow.
I tapped my nose and pointed at her. I got 3 sets of confused gazes for my trouble, but Priya was ready for those too.
That silly expression means that I'm right.
Your mother?
Jara,
Priya answered with derision. I cleared my throat. He, wasn't around for that part. She's your mother? Giles asked. He shook his head. Your pairing takes on even deeper meaning. He stood, then clasped his hands behind his back. He reminded me of a history professor at my community college who would pace in front of the class like that, his gaze glued to the floor as he pontificated about the significance of events surrounding Octavius in ancient Rome. I will compromise. You get the abbreviated version. He didn't wait for any objections. When the king absorbed the university and its satellites into the monarchical government many decades ago, the faithful of Broomhill, of whom there were few, believe me, sensed Enora's energy flowing from the dark wood. Something changed. I'm an elf. Where magic and religion are concerned, they're as ingrained into my consciousness as the daggers sheathed in the back of my belt. I see. Your curiosity would naturally be piqued. I nodded. You do not yet see, but that's none of your own fault. Word traveled to my people of a magical being living in the forest. You see, Jara never showed herself until the magicians of this continent were under duress. Due to a set of inconvenient circumstances, I required a place to lie low, and since Broomhill is exactly what you called it, I thought it as good a place as any. You're not going to tell us why you were on the run? I asked. As I said, short version now, long story later. We all have our secrets, Gemini, and they are ours to keep or share when we see fit. But I make no secret of the fact that I would lay down my life in the service of Jara, guardian of the Tree of Solara. I believe she sheltered me from prying eyes in Broomhill. In return, I pledged my service through prayer. I might never have stepped into the dark wood, because it wasn't my place to enter her domain. But the energy in Broomhill fed my soul, and I knew it was a power worth protecting from the darkness. You don't begin to grasp your blessings. His gaze turned to Priya. None of you does. He paused while we all exchanged looks. In short, my time came. You needed a mentor, and I am just the elf for that job. He raised a finger. But, if you ever deem we should part ways, you need only say so, and I will leave you to your destiny. Until then, I will serve your party for as long as you will have me, because it is both my debt to Jara and Solara, as well as my desire to return the light to this world. You have been offered companionship. Giles, a fierce rogue of some renown, has offered to become your companion and mentor. If you accept, Giles will follow you until you decide it is time for him to depart. Would you like to accept Giles' offer? Okay, I hadn't expected that. This badass elven rogue and weapons trainer is offering to accompany my party wherever we go. Still, I pushed my luck. It was a pitfall of my inquisitive mind. What about Brugh? I asked. The elf tilted his head to one side for a moment, his white hair barely moving with the gesture. What if we leave discussions of Brugh for when we're with Brugh? I wondered from his tone if the two had a falling out. If that was true, then the warrior's loss was my gain. I'm honored you would adventure with us and join my party, Giles. I accept your offer of companionship and welcome you as a mentor. Giles is now your companion. Increase disposition with this NPC for an opportunity to bind him to you. Giles gave a curt nod. Formality sounds suspect on your silver lips, mystic, but I thank you. The honor is mine. One day you'll see that. He stepped closer and extended his hand. I rose long enough to grasp it and match his smile with a genuine one of my own. Welcome to the party, Giles. May we adventure long and successfully together. But not just adventure, right? Coexist. How could I have forgotten? In the excitement over recent level gains when we completed the Rescue Roshan quest, I'd forgotten the reward about which I'd been most curious. You seem confused, perplexed. The answer waited in my bag of holding. I focused on my interface and scanned the filled slots for the item I'd been promised by Lucera. And it's there. I withdrew my hands from the bag and clutched the object in a firm grip. Then I unfolded my fingers to reveal a blue crystal stone with a shining red rune shaped in a box with 2 lines forming an angular roof. Cheesy, but effective. The women slid closer on the edge of the fountain to eye the crystal as a light bloomed from inside. Ancient city of Nin, Giles snapped, taking a step back. Is that a... Priya shuffled over and leaned against me.
What's that? It's pretty.
Destiny tilted her head to one side. Roshan wore a confused look. She ran the tip of her soft finger over the carving.
A rune, but I've never seen such a stone in all my days of mining. I wonder at its value. Foundation stone, an exceptional and scarce item. This magical stone can be buried in the place of your choosing to create a township foundation. A township is an adventurer's settlement where you can grow a military presence, establish residences, build crafting halls, establish trade routes, and expand your claim of Enora's lands. Type, immortal stone of power. Quality, legendary. Durability, unbreakable. Recoupable item. Soulbound to Gemini Fowler.
Giles shook his head in disbelief. Every time I think I have a grasp on how touched you are, I find myself humbled. I was freaking giddy. Pretty cool, right? One side of Giles' upper lip twitched, then he shook his head some more.